So hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Carl Melford. I'm the emergency manager for Gila County. I'll be serving as your moderator today. Before we get into the full introductions, I would like to introduce District 2 Supervisor Humphrey to give us some opening remarks.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming in. We're live on YouTube as well. YouTube will also be available for questions. So if you're on YouTube, you can type in questions. As we talk, if you come up with questions, type them in. There will be a little bit of a delay. And so we'll get to questions after. We're going to do a short presentation. J.E. Fuller is going to do a presentation. Maybe Tom will do it here with the county. J.E. Fuller is the one that did the design on the creeks. We're, 2 weeks away from 90% complete on the designs. We've spent, most of the time has been spent with property owners and working the creeks and see how we can best carry the water flow that we're expecting to come. And so we wanted to get to a good design before we presented it to the public. We've had some calls and concerns on what we're doing with the trees and those things, what we're doing on private property. And so that's what we're here for tonight, is to answer questions. I believe J.E. Fuller will be here tomorrow. You'll be here tomorrow? Okay, so if someone wants to meet specifically on a piece of property that they own after we do the presentation, that'll be possible. It's your property, so you know how you work with us on the design of where it's going is important to us and to you as well. And so, like I say, we'll do a short presentation and then there'll be questions and answers. And we have Omar Villa, Assistant County Manager, and Tom, the County Engineer. So we're here, and if you have questions that we're unable to answer, we'll definitely get back to you. But hopefully we'll be able to let you know pretty much where we're trying to go and where we're able to go with trying to carry drainage down these creeks. And you know, we're not getting near the water that we used to, so we're kind of in a drought right now. So the damage that we've had could be worse as time goes on if we get more water like we used to get than we've got lately. So I'm going to sit down and let you ready for your presentation? Okay.
Supervisor Humphrey, let's do an introduction. I'd like to introduce
Okay.
everybody from Gila County that's here.
Okay.
My name is Homer Vela, and I'm the Assistant County Manager. I've been working with the team and watching them as they do the work that they do. J.E. Fuller is an outstanding engineering firm in the state of Arizona. They've done a lot of work with fires and mud flows and drainage issues all across the state and even across the southwestern United States. They did a lot of work with Coconino County. They're here, but I'd like to go around the room, both the people that are here at the table, plus I know that I see our floodplain manager back there and our Director of Public Works. I'd like for them to stand up and say hello to you, and then we'll go with the presentation. So I finished my introduction. My name is Homer Vela, and I'm the Assistant County Manager. Fortunately for me, I'm retiring this Friday, so it's the last time you'll see my face here, but I felt it important to be here with you tonight. So why don't we start with Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a county engineer. I just wanted to make a comment. There's a sign-up sheet going around. Please fill out it and keep it going, circulating through the crowd.
Hi, I'm Tom Goodman. I'm the county engineer, and glad to be here and hope we can answer all your questions tonight.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Joe Lovrich. I'm with J.E. Fuller, and we talking through this design in a moment.
Go get Steve. Sanders, Gila County Public Works. And Dart?
Dart Brulac, I'm the floodplain engineer.
Okay.
I'm Paul Cooper, I'm the project engineer at J4 as well. Good to meet y'all.
I'd also like to acknowledge Representative David Cook. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and turn it over to J.E. Fuller for our presentation.
All right. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. This part of the process is important, and so I appreciate you taking the time, coming out here, and listening through how we've approached this project, how we've gotten to where we are at, and where we're going from here. So let me get through a few things, and then we'll have some time for Q&A, and then some time also at the end for, if there's some very property specific questions that aren't necessarily for the whole group, then we can talk through those individually with our plans and that sort of thing. So let's, is there any way to kill the front lights at all in here a little bit? Hey, all right. That's great. So you all know the Telegraph fire. I don't need to explain the stats on it. A year ago now, burned a big chunk of the mountains. The kind of the one chunk that it didn't burn was the 17 Pinal fire. It slopped over into that fire a little bit, but generally speaking, it burnt the rest of the mountain. So what our role was in this was to help the county do some post-fire flood modeling right off the bat to say, okay, it's a burnt, compromised watershed. This is what we can expect for flood flows for certain type of events that are going to happen throughout the watershed. So what we did was we see what happens in a fire is the heat affects the soil in different ways. So you have the vegetation that burns off. Number one, and the vegetation is something that you'll catch the rainfall as it goes down, so it doesn't. Raindrops aren't directly hitting the soil. And then once you have the heat on the soil, it changes the properties at the top of the soil. So those properties could be changed from very, very thin amount of soil on top to pretty thick and a high burn severity, and that affects both everything in the soil. So all the organics in the soil, all the roots, and that hold it together, right? So a lot of this fire was pretty severe. And so those effects are pretty significant on the amount of sediment that can run off of the hillsides and the amount of sediment that's sourced out of the channels. Because when the water is flowing down, it has higher velocity, it has more content, more sediment and rocks in the water. It has more power to then excavate the streams as they come down and put that excavation down once the streams level out. So what we did was we did this first round of modeling to show potentially what it would be, and then began to work within the framework of NRCS emergency watershed protection projects. The emergency watershed protection program is just that. It's for emergencies. It's for natural disasters. It's Fed money that comes through NRCS, and it can be used for small, like sandbagging like operations or placing barriers, that sort of thing, or longer term projects that are stabilization or channelization or what have you to help protect resources downstream. So we came up with a list of just throwing things at the wall with things that could potentially help. That list was then weeded down to some of the primary solutions that came forward to provide that not only fit within the NRCS framework with their funding, but they also provide benefit to the downstream developed areas and to infrastructure and so those solutions look different from wash to wash. It's not a one size doesn't fit all with every drainage. So So what we did was we came up with, four primary areas of concern, and this was discussed with NRCS from the very get-go, from last fall, late summer into fall. And so, if we start, just to take you through it real quick, if we start west and move east, Bloody Tanks Wash, real compromised watershed. They had some big flooding last summer. A lot of it's due to the capacity in the existing channel, so it's some work to increase the capacity. Moving on further, Russell, Gulch had a lot of flooding. Same thing with Russell. You have a large watershed producing a large amount of sediment, comes down to a flat area where that sediment can drop out of the water and impact a big area. And so there was a lot of flooding there. Moving over, there's six-shooter and Ice House, which we're talking about tonight. And so the Russell and the Bloody Tanks, we're going to save that for tomorrow night. We're focusing on now is six-shooter and Ice House Canyon, or more specifically, the Albany Drive Bridge. And this one is a little bit different in that Six-Shooter Canyon is very channelized. And I'll get there. I'm jumping ahead of myself. So the way this goes is you come up with a mitigation alternative. We develop that, get it approved by NRCS for funding, and then it moves forward into design. And that's where we are at right now. So I kind of ran through this stuff first, but NRCS, this has been hand in hand with them since the very beginning. So they have to approve they have to make sure, that the stuff you're proposing makes sense with the amount of damage that can be caused by the floodwaters. So you're not spending $11 million on a $2,000 culvert or something like that. It has to make sense with the type of improvements you're doing. So the funding was approved last fall. That funding has a window, typically a 220-day window in which you're supposed to spend it. That for big projects like we have, that's very difficult to do. So we're working on getting an extension to be able to allow these projects to be built within that extension of the time frame. So the engineering process, there's a whole set of flood modeling that goes on. We need to understand what the existing conditions are, what type of storm we're designing for, and our proposed improvements. How do those react? How do the floodwaters then react to our proposed improvements? And are the improvements robust enough for the type of flows that comes down? Because this is not clear water, right? This is bouldery. Any of you who have ever stood next to a flow coming off of a fire, you can feel it. You can feel the boulders rolling and things like that. There's a lot of power in the water. So whatever improvements get designed have to be resilient in order to not fall apart. So we've gone through a geotechnical investigation to understand the subsurface conditions in these places we've designed. Survey, we're in the final design phase of these projects, then they go to construction. And I'll talk through more of that in a little bit. So let's jump right into it. So we're going to start on, what I'm going to do is just kind of step through our designs and what we're proposing. And so Albany Drive, this is off Ice House Canyon Road. It's a county-owned bridge. There's a head cut on the bottom end of it. A head cut is basically meaning that the wash is lower than the elevation of the bridge upstream, and that's the kind of a continual process that'll keep going in that wash. And so what this is, if I turn here so I can point out of this a little bit, this is the bridge right here. Upstream of the bridge, which is this picture here, is going to be some riprap, larger riprap to both just to protect the inlet of the bridge. It's pretty limited in length, and it's the extent of that is not a lot, because the main risk isn't on the upstream side of the bridge, but we do want to protect these abutments when water does come around them. So that's the purpose of the riprap. downstream of the bridge, there's been various vintages of concrete poured in there. And so what's going to happen in there is that concrete's going to be saw cut off, a gabion stepped structure essentially down to a stable elevation in the wash, and gabion wall on the far side of the channel. So as you drive from the Ice House Canyon Road across the bridge, it's going to be on the far side. That slope's sloughing off, and so it's really to tie that slope in to prevent it from sloughing off anymore and make this pretty resilient. So it's a pretty, it's not a very invasive project. It's really protecting that bridge and keeping that water flowing the right way through it that we want it to. So the implementation on this is one of the smaller projects. This one and Bloody Tanks are smaller. The design plans are complete. It's going to go out to bid soon, or it's got to go through the proper channels to get ready for bid. It goes out to bid to be constructed this fall. So none of this stuff is going to happen during monsoon season. It's not a good time to have excavators in the wash. So it's going to happen, post monsoons. On this one, there is one construction easement that we need to get for the work right downstream. There's a little sliver of Forest Service land that makes it tricky for just kind of right on the upstream end of the bridge that we're working with the Forest Service on. Okay, so 6-shooter. This is the way we're approaching 6-shooter is there are certain areas that are constrictions that need to be opened up, and there are certain areas that are high scour potential and damage potential to the road itself and to the utilities in the road. So the upper end of this project is at Dolores Lane, and it's that double barrel box culvert that has a lot of, it's been overtopped in a number of storms. It's got all the scour on the bottom side of it. What we're proposing there is it's a 32-foot wide arch box structure. So if you think about it, the footprint's about 10 feet wider than what is there now. We're keeping the road the same elevation so that if the road is overtopped and overwhelmed, it doesn't push the flow anywhere different than it goes right now. And it also it limits our footprint upstream and downstream with how much work we have to do. So originally we were trying to contain the entire 10-year post-fire flood. So 10% chance of happening type flood event. It's about 5,000 CFS. Try to get that all under the road. That was going to be some major channel improvements upstream, downstream. What we did was we scaled it back to be a more reasonable size structure that in the very large events, like the largest events you've seen, water will probably go over the road, but at least it'll contain the majority of the floods that come down through here, and it'll be a very resilient structure. So the footprint of that, there's some riprap upstream, but it's a very, very limited footprint to where the two wing walls at the inlet go just basically 5 feet upstream of where the existing bridge is, and then a little bit downstream. So that's the extent of that part of the project. That's the capacity issue. When we go downstream, there are specific places along the wash where the erosion on the side of the road is concerning as far as the type of how they've changed throughout the flood events and how we think they could continue to change. So you've all seen on Russell Road, when scour events begin to happen, even in that kind of conglomerate that's in those washes, it can happen very quickly. And so what we're trying, and you can lose whole sections of the road. So there's the road, there's a gas line in the road, and What we're trying to do is to look at the most high-risk areas, which are generally on the outside of bends, and protect that bank. The way we're proposing to protect that bank is through a shotcrete, not so much a wall, but shotcrete bank protection. So it's like a 1-to-1 slope, and since it is beyond the stable slope of that material, it has to have some retaining properties. So the way it's going to be retained is through soil nails. So soil nails that are driven into the bank, and then the shotcrete that with the reinforcement that's put on the bank. And so it maintains a 1-to-1 slope through these areas, and I'll just talk through each of these areas and you'll kind of see. But this kind of is a graphical depiction of what's happening. You have the guardrail up on top, the road here, and a 1-to-1 slope. The challenge with this wash is that it has a high scour potential. So the scour potential in the wash is about 10 feet in most places. And this isn't something that you'll see. This isn't something that you'll generally see. A lot of times the event-based scour happens during a storm, and then as the storm is tailing off, it'll fill in the scour holes as the water is slowing down through there. So, but if you don't protect the bottom of these walls, then they will be undermined, and it'll be more catastrophic than if you didn't do anything there.
And Joe, shotcrete is a concrete slurry?
Yeah, shotcrete is a blown concrete slurry. So what you do is you clean off the slope, you prep your slope, and you can do it in multiple ways, but you spray a first layer on, put in a welded wire mesh or other reinforcement, and that's being designed right now, put on another layer, and so that thickness is then designed to be resilient enough for the type of water and the velocity of the water and type of material that's coming down. And then that's all tied into the soil nails that are first driven into the slope. I'll show you. Yep. So there's 4 main pieces of bank. This is not a full wash construction type project. This is very specific areas where both in the modeling we're seeing that there's high velocities, high potential for scour, and where there is observable scour that's happened during some of these storm events. So the first one is right by the Mountain Shadows Mobile Home Park. There's a steel bridge that crosses the wash. Right downstream of that, there is it's on the outside, the road is on the outside of the bend. There are some pretty good trees and root structures in there, but between those trees and root structures, there's some pretty significant scour that's happening in there. And so that's the first component of it. Then the next piece is downstream, right upstream of the Arizona Reservation Ministries bridge. It gets again on the outside of a bend, and it's a bank that's been eroding, and so to protect that bank up to the bridge. The third piece of this, there's 1, 2, and then the third piece actually has 2 components to it. This is the Abiquiu Bridge. And upstream, number one, this is where the water came out of the channel. So as the floodwaters came down, this is where it skipped out of the channel onto the road and then came back into the channel during one of those events last year. So we want to be able to not only protect the bank, but protect those bridge abutments there. And so right upstream of the bridge, there's going to be some of the bank protection on both sides to protect the 2 abutments of the bridge. And then right downstream, if you walk down through that channel, there's some kind of high scoured areas good area, high scour areas, good area. It's intermixed. And so what we're trying to do is we're gonna basically on all the county land, because this is all a big stretch of county right here, is run that bank protection down that portion, just to at Cherokee, just down to where Cherokee runs in. And that part is tricky because we don't want to, the goal here is not to protect, to construct this wall just for the sake of constructing a wall. And we realize that some areas look better than others, right? But the challenge when you start building hardened structures in a natural environment is that at the ends of these hardened structures, like the wall, you're going to end up with points at which scour can occur and points of failure of what you just built. And so having a stop, start situation is not the ideal way to go. So what we wanted to do is find these areas where they were primarily at risk, put this bank protection through it, and seal up that portion of it. And so that's the extent of the six-shooter canyon improvements. These projects, besides the Dolores Bridge, don't increase the capacity of that channel. If we wanted to increase the capacity of that channel, it would look like the channel through Globe. It would be a concrete channel, and that's not what we're intending to do with this. But what we want to do is help protect what's there from getting washed out so that you still have access. So, challenges on this. Basically, we're focusing on these discrete points that we saw risk. Within those points, we have tried our best to limit tree removal. This is a riparian area in Arizona. We love our riparian areas because there's not a lot of them. So we're trying to limit our impact to the trees. In certain areas, though, some of the trees have to come down to put this in. And so in these sections of where we're showing the wall improvements, it's not a the trees have to be cut down in the length of those. And the total, to your question, was about it's about 2,000 linear feet total in the couple mile stretch of road that we're looking at. So the other point of this is all of these improvements are being coordinated with you, the property owners. So we are not gonna, the county is not gonna go in there and take your trees out if you don't approve of it on your property. So it's not an eminent domain type deal. So there's been even portions of this project that have gotten chopped out as we've gone along the way because of concerns of different property owners. So that there's a few people that we still need to talk to, but some of you are here that we've talked to before, and I'd like to review some of the changes, like at the Dolores Lane Bridge with you, show you what we've done and how we're affecting just those two trees at the very inlet, and that's it. You know, so that's what we want to be really cognizant of that. So implementation of this. Temporary construction easement and drainage easement phase is what, or we need these easements pretty quick here. So we're going to be coordinating with each of the owners where we need temporary construction easement. We need to get equipment in the wash to build these things. And also if we're putting a hard structure on your property, then we'd be looking for a drainage easement in that case, because it's got to be something that needs to be maintained. So there's a number of drainage easements along this portion, some small, some bigger, just to be able to contain the improvements that we're proposing. That's going on right now. The final design, our 90% plans are just about there, and they'll be done in a couple weeks. We have to finish our Army Corps 404 permitting for this whole stretch. We need to, and that should be soon here. Bidding will be in the fall. This will be basically a late, early 2023 construction, probably December through May. Try to get it done before monsoons of next year. It's a big project. And so that's our time frame. And with that, I'd like to open it up for questions. The way I'd kind of like to approach this tonight is if you have kind of a bigger picture question about why we're proposing certain things or that, this is a great place to ask them. If they're more specific questions, like I want to look at my house on the map and show me something specific, then let's save that for a one-on-one discussion afterwards that the whole group doesn't need to listen to. So there's a couple of properties, and Tom, help me out, that we still need to talk to, which are Arizona Reservation Ministries and upstream, the portion of wall just upstream of that. So I'd like to know where you're at and.
I'm below your county land across the Cherokee.
Let's see. Oh yeah, you're down here. Yeah, then we're not affecting your property there.
You're not changing the flow per se.
No. Yeah, something we've been really cognizant of is in building this bank, we're limited in our type of construction because we have to keep the road in place, and we don't want to push the bank of the channel into the channel anymore by creating a thicker like soil cement type bank or something like that. So the flow patterns through there is going to remain what they are. In this area right here, no. There's a few places where the channel, it's a little bit sinuous through there where it goes against the road, it goes around some bigger trees, and then against the road. And so this wall is going to be pretty much straight through there. So we aren't doing anything on if you're looking downstream, the right side of the bank. So this one, there's a few places where there's a large tree on channel left, on the left side, on the road side of the bank. That's going to be removed, and so that'll open up the conveyance right there. But it's not going to add to the global capacity of that channel. No.
Hey, Joe.
Yep.
What I might suggest, if we're gonna go into the Q&A, is.
Oh, yeah.
So the people on YouTube can hear, is let the, people have a question, let them come up to the microphone, that way everybody on YouTube can hear it, and then maybe
Yeah.
Carl can moderate for us.
Okay, yeah, good call.
Or do we have a portable one? No.
We can put the table up here and have the table available.
You can also just come up here.
Yeah, if somebody's got a question. If that helps.
Sure.
Do we have any on YouTube?
So yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. So before we go further into Q&A, I just want to remind everybody that's watching online that you can type your questions into the comment box, and we will address those as well. If there's anybody else in the crowd that has a question, feel free to step up and ask it.
I just had a question about the soil nails, how long they are.
So the question was how long the soil nails are.
I don't know yet. We're working with our geotech engineer. They're designing that portion of it now. There's a gas line in the road that we're maintaining 6 feet of space at least from that, and so we're going to circle back with Southwest once we have, because we have to design that first row of nails down far enough, and then they're angled And so once we have that final angle set, which is real quick here, we can lay it out in terms of where that gas line is based on the blue stakes and make sure we have plenty of space.
Anyone else in the audience have questions? Do you want to come up here, Randy? And
How far down into the flow line, below the flow line, are you gonna put this shotcrete?
So the shotcrete will go down. It varies between 7 and 9 to 10 feet below below the existing grade of the channel. So a challenge that we had with this is, since the road is so close, we had to find a construction method where we can build it from the top down. Basically, if we're building it from the bottom up, the shoring of the road plus the amount you're going to be excavating into the channel was too severe. And so with the shotcrete type construction, we can work our way down from the top. So it's gonna be excavated down below grade into the channel backfilled on it to what the existing grade was.
so for additional questions, please try to come up to the mic so that way folks online can hear the questions so we don't get duplicate questions. You said you have a question?
How do you operate this thing? I want to go back to that screen and zero. I live right across the creek from that entrance there, and no, where is it? So the red pointer right there. That looked like the screen was on the floor. If you could put it from that one? Yeah, right there. I live across the creek over here on the east side of that. Okay. At some point, I would be interested in building a dip across there for egress and ingress. Would I have the engineering department's assistance in developing that? Tom, would that be available to us?
Yeah, I'm not sure I totally understand the question.
Well,
Is it on
I
private
had-
property?
Huh?
If it's on private property?
It's an easement. It comes down to that.
So you live on this side over here?
If I'm looking at that property, yes, I live right across the creek.
Okay.
It's called Bedford Drive. And Dickinson Drive dead ends at my property.
But I can do-
Okay, I think Steve has had some experience with that. Steve, you might get a mic as well. We're gonna have to get IT to get some handheld mics maybe at some point in time, please.
Yes, in the back of the room is Dar Durulak, our floodplain engineer. He can explain to you what the county requirements would be to.
Or I'd have to have an engineer, and I'm asking, is your engineer available to help us with that design without extraordinary cost?
No, we can review the plans and maybe make some suggestions, but we can't do it for you.
Any other questions? I invite you to come step up to the mic.
Now, you and I never met, but we've
Talked via email, or tried to, for about 4 months. And after 4 months of asking to be part of this engineering process, we've had 0 input. Now, we're only a couple of miles
from the county courthouse. I've sent emails to Homer, and I've talked to Tim probably a half a dozen times, and I've talked to him. We have not one time ever, not one, had one single phone call to any of us in that area that you're talking about there. And we're Mr. Thetford lives upstream to the Abiquiu Bridge. Not one time has anybody ever come out and spent 1 minute with us. Now, the things that you're proposing to there seem very benign to you. They're not to us that we live there. All of us that live along that area bought that property for the trees and the environment that it has. People from the Forest Service jog up there every morning. In the summer, there'll be 10 to 15 people every morning. Every evening, there's people cycling up through there. People from the upper subdivisions come down, push their baby strollers, do their family walking through there, only because of the trees and the sidewalk that's there. They could go anywhere. They don't. They come there because of those trees and the environment that it is, the birds and everything. You explained to me what you basically explained here before, which is what has got everybody that lives along that area riled. Now, the scours that you're talking about and that Skim and I have discussed about did not come from this flood. These scours came, the only erosion on that road came from previous erosion that resulted from the backup flows from the Thetford's illegal bridge that backed all the way up above the Abiquiu, and it did it for years. I brought it to the county's attention several times. They came in before they paved it, and they looked at them, and they tried to repair them twice. And mind you, the rocks that they dumped in there in each of those 2 major years are still there. All the floods from 2000 that occurred in 21, including the big one, did not remove those little fist-sized rocks. So you can't tell me that the flows affected the road or the flows from the 2021 had anything to do with those erosions. Those erosions come from improperly designed culverts, no curbing along the road whatsoever to contain flows coming off of the road. And those points there are hundreds of feet apart. And once again, I want to point out that those original rocks that were put in there, each time the county tried to solve the issue without doing it properly by putting a little wall up like yours, which could have been done at any time, especially whenever they repaved the road, they did not do it. But those little fist-sized rocks were there. When the Thetford Bridge was taken out, there was some large boulders that had piled up against that illegal bridge that had caused that scarring for all those years. Were so large that the DJ, our speeder, could not move them. Okay? They were left there. They disappeared through these floods. Okay? They're downstream, and I don't know, and Mr. Cook can tell you about that boulder field that's come from the OCC camp, just a short distance to his property. But nevertheless, the amount of power and the flows that it took to do that did still not remove those little fist-sized rocks that the county dumped in there. So what you guys are proposing through there to do on that road, the removal of all those trees, is totally unfounded. There's no common sense being applied to it. That backup that happened on July the 4th occurred because of that illegal bridge. I was the recipient of it because not only did they put a bridge in, they put in a wall in for the mountain that went all the way to the creek. So it piled up on me, it deadheaded me, and had the gate not been open and had it not went over the bridge, it would have backed up even further. But it didn't. It only backed up to slightly above the bridge, and then it jumped over and came down onto Dickinson Road.
Floyd, we're here to
and came
discuss
down.
what we're doing. We don't need to go backward.
I know, Tim, you never want to go backwards,
Well, I
but they're
don't.
talking
I wanna-
about
I want to go
removing.
forward.
Okay, they're talking about removing some very large, beautiful, mature cottonwood trees and almost all the vegetation. That line there goes from Abiquiu Bridge all the way down to where, looks to me, where Daybreak or something comes in. There's a square box culvert that comes in there. All right, so they're talking about removing all the vegetation along the road from Abiquiu Bridge all the way down there, which is a significant number of large trees. Would you dispute that?
There are some large and there are some a lot of small.
Okay, a lot of large and a lot of small. Okay, right, you don't have to look at it. You didn't spend premium money for that property, and you didn't either, Tim. And so we have to,
I didn't burn the
okay, that's right. But the thing of it is there's been almost a dozen high-flow floods since then. The little small rocks that you guys want to protect the road on are still there. I can show you pictures of them in 14, 18, every year that we had floods when it backed up there, I can show you photographs of it. Those rocks have never moved. The only event that caused that overflow that come into the road was the July 4th event, okay? Nothing after that happened, no more damages occurred or whatever. So please explain to me how you can justify denuding a quarter of a mile of creek and turning it into a concrete canal when there was no damages done and we went through 20 floods. Hyphens, we went through a 4-inch event in one day. No erosion, the little small rocks that were there, and if you'd like to see pictures of them, I could show you. But how can you justify cleaning out all of those big old beautiful mature trees when you're not going to increase the flows? You will not do anything to increase the flows that will be any more than can go through the Abiquiu Bridge.
So let's let the engineer give us an answer. You've asked the question, what's the justification for removing those trees? And we've heard you, I've heard you. You've spent a half an hour with me on the phone. It's the same message that you're delivered. You're consistent. You're telling us that the trees, why are the trees being removed and
Correct.
what's the justification? I'd like a chance to answer that. I'd like to start it off, and I'd like for the engineer to respond to the rest of the, because he's got all the technical things.
Okay,
So
the one
if you
tree
don't
he's
mi- you don't
talking
mind-
about is over 25 or 30 feet from the road. That, what you want to do, proposing there, could be done without removing that one big tree. You could go right on behind it. Most of that stuff that you're talking about can be done without removing those trees, but there's a lot of trees along there.
Okay, we'd like to answer your question.
I'm
Can you
here,
sit down-
I
can you
mean,
sit down and give us a chance?
and there's going to be,
Give others the opportunity. There might be others that, we'll answer your question, you sit down, and if nobody else stands up, you can come back and ask the next question.
okay, I believe there's a lady, Margot Flores, that would like to speak on via the, whatever the link is on YouTube on this as well.
Okay, good. Okay, so, you know, one of the things, and I'm not a hydrologist, I've been in engineering my whole life. I worked with AT&T and supervised many engineers over time, but I'm not the expert on this subject that we're talking about today, but I've listened to the conversations, okay? And I've listened to the modeling that they've done. And the modeling is not a 10-year event. You know, the storms that we have witnessed in the recent past, we're in a 1,200 mega drought right now, 1,200-year mega drought right now. But the storms that we have witnessed in the recent decades have been 10-year events, something to that, in that order of magnitude. The modeling that J.E. Fuller does and a normal engineering firm does, they take it up to a 100-year event. And so they're looking at the velocity of the water that comes through and the amount of sediment. So the velocity changes, you know, and we're looking to protect properties and life and roads. And because NRCS requires it to provide bank stabilization. They want the bank stabilization to limit the amount of sediment that enters the waters of the U.S. So we take all of those things into account, not just what you have witnessed or what I have witnessed, but we look at the modeling. And then the modeling gives us an answer. And so we have to decide, what do we want to do? Do we want to protect trees or do we want to protect lives? Do we want to protect property or do we want to protect trees? Do we want to protect that road? That road with a 50-year event may get washed out. We're trying to make sure we got the maximum conveyance going through there, okay? What do we do when the road gets washed out? Who can go help you, okay? And how can you get out? So, we're making a decision. And our decision is basically, do we want to save lives or do we want to save trees? And to the extent that we can save trees, we'll do that. But when the trees get in the way of saving lives, we've got an easy, quick answer for you. Okay, and so I'll let him perhaps talk a little bit about the modeling and things like that, Joe, and tell us how we arrive at a conclusion that some of these trees need to be removed.
You know, this is something that we have not taken lightly on this design. We've gone through a lot of iterations on this one stretch we're talking about to try and figure out how do we do this appropriately. The clump of trees that you were referring to, those two trees, they are not close to the road. They're 25 feet off, but they are big cottonwood trees with half the root ball hanging out in the creek. And so what we've looked at is with our modeling, okay, we want to understand how is the scour happening? Why is it happening? And how do we prevent that? So the effects of the Abiquiu Bridge being overtopped like it was last year, that's the capacity of the bridge. It's got nothing to do with the downstream in the hydraulics of that channel. It hits that bridge, there's a slight bend in the wash, it comes out of the wash and swings onto the road, and then it has to dump back in. So you have compounding erosion that's going to happen both with the water coming back over the bank and the water that's in the channel. And so the velocities, speed of the water through there is high. When you have a channel full event, you have velocities that are between up over 15 feet per second. That type of velocity, like you said, it moves boulders. Those boulders that were down there, they moved because of the trees, because of the debris, because of the speed of the water. And so what we've looked at, specific to those two trees that we're talking about, there's two big cottonwoods. It's a pinch point in the channel. You can see, if you look out there with a critical eye, you can see the reflective scour, meaning where the water comes down, it hits the channel left bank where those trees are, and it goes right to the other bank on Dickinson Drive. And it actually is eroding out that side of the bank, and you can see where patchwork riprap has been placed to try and prevent it. So the tree on the other side, the root ball is hanging out there also. So what we've looked at is, okay, let's just fix that first portion, run the wall right down to where those trees are. But what happens is our velocities right along that wall are going to be real high when they're hitting this area right in front of those trees. And so either we're going to take it and run it right into the trees and create a worse scour problem in front of those trees, or we're going to bend it. It's going to kick over to the other bank and create a bigger problem on the side of Dickinson. What it's doing is what's the right way to say this? Maybe a little short-sighted when we look at what the purpose of this is and what we're trying to, are we trying to create a solution that doesn't create more problems for us in the future, right? Starting and stopping this wall is gonna do that. We're gonna have problems at those endpoints no matter what. What we've done is we've found good upstream and downstream tie-in locations where we can tie it into the bank and have it be a solid place where the water's not gonna flank it. If those trees are there, in my mind, all bets are off on that section. So.
The scour that you're talking about,
Okay, Mr. Crank, we need to allow other people to speak, please, too. So we're going to keep this to questions and answers if we can. Are there any other questions in the room? Yes, come on up.
I have a question about the shotcrete. I understand you're going to protect the road, protect the gas line, protect the water line. Will you shotcrete both sides of the creek? Sorry. Will you shotcrete both sides of the creek? Or, I live on the east side of the creek, and you're going to shotcrete up by the road. How will you protect homeowners' properties to the east of the road? Because the water will push away from the road once you shotcrete it. If it pushes away from the road, it pushes onto my property. So how will you protect other homeowners' property when you do that? Mountain Shadows, we're right across. So all those places that you've marked along the road, they're right there ready to undercut the road. I saw those. And if you shotcrete that, it'll push property toward me. So is there a plan to protect homeowners' properties once you've done that?
Let me explain.
Sure.
So that one's specific to Mountain Shadows. So we're talking right here. Is that the right section? Okay. So if you can see, all of our projects are focused on the outside of bends, basically. With the channel, a typical channel, you'll have scour and erosion on the outside of the bend, and you'll have deposition on the inside of the bend. So the water is slower on the inside, faster on the outside. That's where you get your scour. With this spot specifically, the one thing we're being cognizant of is when we put in this bank, we're not pulling the bank out into the creek. So we're not constricting the flow rate. So it's basically going to create similar flow conditions to what is now. So so it's not directly impacting your side of the creek on the inside of the bend. So that's why we don't have it on both sides in a lot of these places. We looked at places where if a house was on the outside of a bend, and in our modeling it's showing high velocity and high scour potential, then we were looking at that. Your place specifically, we've looked at that one, and that was one of those where the risk is on the outside of the bend on the road on that one. And in order to put in 2 solid banks on that, it's going to introduce this basically hardened full channel structure. Right now, we're able to just do that one bank, and so the channel can still operate the way the channel wants to operate, but it prevents the scour from going into the road. So that was our thought process on that.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you. For the record, my name is David Cook. I'm a state representative in District 8, but I'm the rancher that lives at the end of Ice House Canyon, have some property in Six Shooter Canyon. I got a couple little questions I just want to go through. Thank you for mentioning the 404 permits. I know that we have some other problems in the counties that we've got the funding for, and we are still waiting for years to finish that, like at the Tonto Basin Bridge. So when I listen to the words that are here tonight, I'm mad at the federal government, and Tim, you're right. You can say you didn't set the forest on fire either, but I only know of one elected official here when that fire was still in Devil's Canyon that kept telling the Forest Service to stop setting the fires, right? David Bales was the incident commander, and on that Wednesday, I sent a letter to the chief that said, I think that guy is borderline incompetent, and in 4 days later, what's happened to this community just proved that guy needs a psychiatric evaluation. There's just something wrong with his decision-making process. Yeah, you just don't set fires like the Forest Service set those fires around a community like this. So here we are today. So we won't look backwards, we'll look forwards. So here we are today. The Forest Service does a thing called the values at risk when you have an incompetent person like that in charge. Values at risk. So here the community is here with their lifelong work and their lives that are at risk. Well, many people have had their homes burned down. So when I get calls from constituents that say, here's what's going on, the government won't come meet and talk to us, then I listen to them, just like you have listened to them. So I come here to listen, and then I haven't been home in 3 days, so I'm gonna go home and have dinner. But let's get back to the 404 permits. What assurances can we have that the government can act appropriately? Because what I heard was emergency funding from the Natural Resource Conservation Service. But you have to use it in 220 some days. Well, we're approaching that, okay? So what I've also heard is that we don't have the 404 permits. The first question is that in the process today? Are the applications already filed with the Corps of Engineers? Have you got discussions, and are you assured that we will have those?
Yeah, so specific to that question, yeah. So we've submitted our first round of pre-construction notifications to the Army Corps. This fits under nationwide permit number 37, which is specific to NRCS emergency watershed protection projects. So we've gotten our first round of comments back. That's being submitted back to the Army Corps, and so we need those in hand before we can start construction. Yes, that's in process.
Yeah, another thing that I want to touch on is that after taking these fire things on since the Telegraph fire, did you all do the engineering up in Coconino County in the city of Flagstaff after the museum fire? Are you the engineering firm they used?
We are
I thought that name was familiar. What happened in Flagstaff, and I'm talking to you, Tim, as the elected supervisor here. What happened in Flagstaff in the city and up there in the county is they hired an engineering firm to go up there, and I've seen those people's homes. And as a result of what the engineering firm does, and I'm not saying that you've done this, but it seems like you're more cautious today than when they did that work up there. In those tributaries that feed those places up there, they went into homeowners and they took their property without their permission. They sloped stuff back, they put riprap in, and then the design was done to put undersized culverts in, and they even tilted them uphill so it would slow the water flow down, which pushed it into the streets. Then the streets went down and flooded these people's homes out. And then they had 10-foot sandbag walls, still there today, because I was just in Flagstaff, that flooded these people's homes and ruined their homes, while their insurance company said, well, we're sorry, your house didn't burn down, but you don't have flood insurance. So now those homeowners were forced to now maybe even sue the city or the county while they're making house payments on homes that were flooded out after the mitigation was done, which was supposed to solve the problem. When they should have gone in, purchased those people's private property and homes in the waterway, made the channel where it would take on more water and just solve the problem right there. They tried to do it cheaper and a less way that affected and hurt more people's lives.
Could I interject on that?
Sure.
So, I live in Flagstaff. The museum fire happened in 2019, right? Does everybody want a little background on this, or?
Yeah, before we go too far
Yeah.
to Flagstaff, we're discussing here, and we're discussing local waterways here, and I understand that maybe there has been engineers in places that have made bad decisions, but we're dealing with our properties here, and we haven't taken anybody's property. We're just trying to help water flow where we can in these few creeks. And by the way, thank you being part of the state, because we're able to hire engineering firms, because NRCS isn't doing anything for us. So thank you very much for working with Ducey to put money into the state so that we can hire engineers to try to protect our roads.
Right.
And so we haven't taken anybody's property, and we're not Flagstaff, so, and I appreciate you being cautious of what could happen, but let's just try to keep it to here and now.
Got it, but you have to use an example. So the ideas of the engineering process, which this all makes sense to me, we have concerns of residents that own property there nearby that need to be addressed, but the actions in which they took had a reaction. And I've heard it 2 or 3 times from you about the undercutting, only doing one section and thing, because we could be doing this, and the homeowner, the property owner over here, he has the same thoughts I do. Well, yes, if it's on the bend, that's where the water's gonna move fast. We all get that, so we're gonna protect that. But what is the reaction when you're not increasing the capacity of the channel flow when we're having so much sediment movement, right? Which is not gonna stop. It's gonna slow down a little bit for the next 2 or 3 years, but then we'll probably be okay as long as they don't burn it up again. But how do we make sure the citizens rest assured as they see this work being done, that just right across from them, that they won't be affected? And then who would go on record to say, well, if we're wrong, then we'll make it right? Or if there's property that does need to be purchased to increase the sediment flow and the water flow, then I think those things should be thought about, is how do we fix it? No, we didn't do it. It's a result of what happened, but can we just not put a Band-Aid on it? We can fix that part you're doing. I think you're doing a good job, by the way. But what do we do if X, Y, and Z happens, which is not expected, but if it does? What is the plan there? That's my question. Do we have a plan?
So, I guess the way to address that is, this is a compromised watershed. These are not solutions. Solution means that the problem goes away. These watersheds are going to keep flowing, and they're going to keep flowing for some time. There's a lot of sediment that's going to keep coming down these washes, right? the purpose of these specific projects on this road is to limit the scour. It's not to increase the capacity of the channel through there unless there's a big push for eminent domain and we want to take all the properties along the channel, which we don't. The idea is to protect what is there now. So what we can do is we have control over our engineering calculations. We have control over how we calculate our scour depths, how we tie our project in, the geometry of that project. What we can't control is what comes out of the watershed. And what we can't control are future fires that happen in the watershed. In Flagstaff, we had the pipeline fire 2 weeks ago. It reburned the entire 2012 or 2010 Schultz fire. So there's potential for these things, and so there's things you can control and things you can't.
So Tim, thank you publicly for doing this. Thank everybody for coming here and voicing your concerns and things. I would suggest you do it in writing, so you have a record of what's happened. The last comments I want to leave to is you talked about, well, if the road got out, how would you get out of that area? Stan, don't get mad at me for mentioning your name, but at the head of Six Shooter Canyon, right? There's a gate. Well, there's a gate at his private property, but there's a bridge before that gate. And so that bridge, 15 years ago, I was over there when Larry Huff was still alive and lived there, and with my old backhoe cleaning that bridge out then when it got stuffed up from all the logs and everything. I don't see it in the plans when you're addressing that area. I know that my corrals and stuff at the end of Six Shooter Canyon, that we had to have Randy and them come do some work, and there was work done in there because the undersized culvert pipes there plugged up, and then the water ran off the road, didn't stay in the creek, ran through our property, took, and did damage there. So I would hope that, I don't even know why you guys don't pave that all the way to Stan's, but instead of sending a blade down there, but I would hope that while all of this is going on, it wouldn't take 15 minutes to get through the 404 permit process to address the bridge down there at Stan's, because if something does happen to that other road, that's going to be the enter and exit for all those people locked up on the other side. You're not going to send them out through pipeline or through Baines and Walters Ranch. That's not going to happen. You're going to ask him to, Mr. Parker, can we allow the public to go through here until we fix the road? And Stan's a great guy, and he'd probably say yes. I'm not going to talk for him. But so in looking down the road, I think that you should look at from the end of Six Shooter Canyon, where the pavement ends, right there, all the way through those undersized culvert pipes as you turn right to head to Stan's, and that little concrete box bridge that's there. And I think that, once again, the amount of money that would cost to fix those two small places could I think about like a bill in the legislature traveling through the process. A lot of times you can run a bill, you can do all this stuff. It's a lot easier just to attach an amendment to something, a vehicle that's already moving. And a lot of good work gets done that way, like the $4 million backdating the Woodbury fire for the county. So anyway, thank you again for doing this, and thank you for everybody being here. Thank you, sir. Good seeing you, Carl.
Any other questions? Joe, I'm looking on YouTube and I'm not seeing any questions here, so, Chris?
Hi, my name's Chris Jones. I'm with the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension. I've been living in Globe for 23 years. I do educational programs and extension programs in watershed, riparian areas, and science and impacts climate change. So I just want to make myself available as a resource. If you ever have any questions, feel free to contact me. And particularly I was thinking, Dave, thanks for all these types of questions you just put up, but was the feasibility considered, or what would the feasibility be of having an upstream stormwater retention dam? That could be, and I know there's going to be barriers and opportunities of that, but was an upstream stormwater retention dam considered for our 4 creekways?
Thank you. Yeah, Yes, the answer to that is, well, first of all, thank you for being a resource. And second, yes. So in our first round of ideas, we considered debris barriers of various types up in the watersheds. There's a lot of cable type debris barriers, there's bollard type debris barriers, there's a lot of different examples from a lot of watersheds in Colorado that have been burnt, various places like that. So we have two primary challenges. One is that the volume of sediment and debris that's available within these watersheds is really high. And so constructing structures that can have an impact downstream by taking enough of that debris off, not failing, and being maintainable is low. That the amount of debris that's going to come out it's still very high. It's with the gradient of the channels and the confinement, you're not able to get enough volume. If we start to look downstream to where we could possibly put in detention, kind of larger, like build a dam, right? Well, that dam is going to fill, and you have to be able to maintain it. And not only that, you have to be building a resilient enough structure that's not going to fail. And so by doing a dam-like structure or any kind of retention in watersheds that produce the amount of water that we have, they would be massive, and we don't have the real estate to actually make a big enough impact. We looked at several places where the wash widened out, like not considering property ownership, not considering anything, just topography. Where would we put them? And the amount of storage that we could actually get doesn't make a dent in the big events. There's too much volume, and so it's a good thought. If we were in the watershed protecting a certain road or something like that, you might look at a debris net or barrier or something like that to keep the road from washing out. But using those to reduce the amount that's getting in the neighborhood is not feasible for this.
I thought property ownership would be a big problem with that, you know. It seems like the only place something like that could happen would be on public land. Yeah. And, but I had an opportunity to see the structure at Acker Park in Prescott. And wow, what that could do, but again, how big does it have to be for these areas is something. But once we cut down those trees, they don't come back. You just mentioned we're in a 1,200-year drought, and when we lose these cotton trees, we don't see them come again.
Say, Joe, if I could just offer something. It's really a good topic to talk about, but it's a topic bigger than Gila County. We need to engage the Forest Service in that. I think after every fire, they need to take some mitigation action that says, here's what we're doing. We're doing our fair share to control the sediment that comes down. We end up with all that debris and all that sediment, and we're trying to come up with a solution here that does no harm, that tries to maintain the flow of the channel, that tries to avoid the overtopping so that then we lose control of the stream. Keep it in the channel if we can. We're not guaranteeing that this is a 100-year solution. First of all, you just heard that it's discrete portions of the stream that are being mitigated. So we're looking to do no harm to the folks that are on the opposite shore, on the opposite bank, to do no harm to anybody. We're trying to maintain that road, maintain the flow, and we're trying to do it with the dollars available. Actually, in the other NRCS project that we did, Tom Goodman worked on that one, we had very good cooperation with the 404 permitting process. And NRCS is going to help us with that, and we are working with the Army Corps. In recent years, the work that we've done with Army Corps has been a lot more successful than the ones that I experienced 10 years ago. They're a little bit more customer service driven. They still have a ways to go, but I don't think they're going to impede the project. But nonetheless, the question that was asked about the sediment traps upstream, we need to keep working that. We can't give up on that. That is a much more robust solution. if the Forest Service engages with the folks that are affected by the fires. Okay?
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience?
Lady that can't get on the YouTube thing, she would like to say something, so I'll try it this way. Is it on?
Okay.
Go ahead, Margot.
Huh?
Go ahead and talk. I'm holding the speaker up.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so my name is Margot Flores. I'm a resident on 6 Sugar Canyon on Dickinson. And I just want to say my voice right now is I bought this property here about 8 years ago. The only reason I bought this property is because of the seclusion of this property, because of the foliage. That was a huge part of why I bought this. Huge part. I wanted my privacy. I just wanted that kind of seclusion, and that's, as I say, a big part of why I did this. So now I'm learning to find that this foliage might be taken away from us. I have, in that 8 years, my property has probably gained about, I don't know, 100 to 120,000 since I bought it. And that's because of what I've done to this property right here. I'm in a flood zone, yes, I am. That's all distinguished, especially from last year. But what my huge concern is the whole, if you take away all these natural greeneries, those natural shades, and what attracts us to these places in the first place is going to reduce the value on my property as is. And that is what I'm not happy about. I think I absolutely 100% have a say in that. I would like to talk to anybody that disagrees with that. As I say, I've spent a lot of money on investing in my property, making it more valuable than it was initially. And I have also seen a lot of work on the creek since it flooded us on the 4th of July. So yeah, the big thing happened the 4th of July in front of my house. Boom, it all took place. So since that time, there's been a lot of work that has dug out that creek and has made it wider and bigger and has dug out things that were constricting in the first place. And since then, we had a lot of heavy floods, and that did not have the same effect. So my concern is, yes, do we really need to take out that foliage? That we're living in the desert, guys. Come on. Well, I mean, we don't have a lot of green as it is. 6 Shooter is renowned for some of the beautiful trees that we have, and it's taken decades of years to get them to where they're at. Can we just totally take them away without a second thought? I hope not. I really, really hope not. I really want to fight this very, very hard, and whatever I need to do and who I need to talk to make this better and stronger, I'm more than willing to do that. I can't be there tonight because I'm ill. I've been off work. That's probably why I sound a little funky and nasally, but I've been off work, but I still have a very, very strong opinion about this, and I want to be heard. And if I am not heard at this level, then I want to be known who I can talk to at the next level. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, just keep watching it on YouTube, I guess. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You know, I'm gonna say something. What you're proposing right through there is the most intrusive in the entire 6 Shooter area that you're talking about doing. It's the most intrusive, the most destruction. And there's no way you can get the flows through the upper bridges all the way up. By doing anything you're gonna do, you're not gonna increase any flows above Abiquiu. Not only that, the flows that are there, the flows are far more constricted down on Jess Hayes Road than down in there. Nothing you're proposing right there is gonna do is to improve the flows. Nothing. And if it goes to litigation, if this thing gets tied up in litigation and everything, you will have to prove that it increased the flows below for the purpose of making it better all the way up, and you won't be able to do it. Do you know what I'm saying? Joe, you know what I'm talking about. You can't get, okay, the purpose you're saying is to protect
Floyd, this
that
is for
road.
question and answer, not to argue with the engineer.
You know,
If you have a question, we'll do the best we can to answer it.
This is over with, we'll talk some more, Tim.
Okay, that's fine, but it's question and answer, not argue with the engineer over their design and development. If you have a question about the design and development, he'll be happy to answer your question.
Any other questions? Okay, so before we close out, I want to take off my moderator hat and put on my emergency manager hat for a bit. Somebody mentioned earlier that there's been a lot of work done in the creek, and I just want to kind of reiterate that. I did a lot of inspections of the creek prior to the flooding, and there were areas that it was difficult to walk through. When House Bill 2001 was passed and we were able to secure contractors to get them out there doing work, some of which are in the room here today, they did amazing work on those creeks. It went from the point where, you know, it was hard to walk through them to now you can take a small truck through the majority of the creeks. So looking forward, I do want to present a level of caution. Yes, the creek flow capacity has increased, and there are measures in place to assist in that, but we are still within the watershed of a massive burn scar, and we need to be aware of that. If you have not signed up for emergency alerts through Ready Gila, at readygila.com/Everbridge, please do so. That's our notification system that it does rebroadcast flash flood warnings. The one big takeaway from last year is, you know, we've all heard the negative and finger pointing and everything like that. We made it through one of the state's worst flash flooding issues without a single life lost. And I'd like to see that continue. So please sign up for emergency alerts, be aware of what goes on in your area, and help your neighbors that may not have the ability to do so. With that,
Let them know that we do have the cameras and the monitors up these creeks, so if you live by a creek, we can monitor the rain and the flows.
yes, absolutely. So if you go to gilacountyaz.gov, there's a rain gauge bubble under the popular items right on the front page. Impossible to miss it. You can watch those rain gauges in real time with me, because if it's raining, I'm probably watching them. So, but again, I want to thank everybody for their time today. Still not seeing any questions on YouTube, so I appreciate your time. Everybody have a wonderful day and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.